Testing, testing. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep. I can hear you too, and there's no echo. All the planets have aligned.
Yeah, this is Doug. I can hear you.
Hi, Doug. And Mrs. Peck, we're ready to go.
All right.
One last thing.
Let's do this. I now call to order the Economic Development, Tourism and Events Commission meeting at December 9th at 5:02 p.m. We'll do roll call. Will the clerk please take roll call?
Yes, ma'am. Kelly Lean or Commission Member Lean,
Here.
Commission Member Warner,
Present.
Commission Member Case,
Here.
Commission Member Congleton,
Here.
Commission Member Peck.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
All right. Did anyone submit a public comment in advance?
No, ma'am.
If anyone in actual or virtual attendance would like to speak, please raise your hand now. Star 9 is used to raise your hand if you are connected by phone. No comments. We will move on. We will now move to the consent agenda. We're ready?
Yeah.
All right. We will now move on to the consent agenda. Consisting of approval of the minutes. Are there any items that anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? All right. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. This is Doug.
Do we have a second?
Second, this is Kelly.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we have it approved. We will now move on to presentations and reports. Do we have any presentations?
We do. Mr. Paul Saldana is an attendee and should. Can you hear us, Paul? Can you hear me, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder why. Could we move on to the next presentation until Mr. Saldana? Oh, he raised his hand.
Maybe can he be promoted to a panelist and then he'll be able to talk, or?
Or can I promote him to a panelist right here? Oh.
We're just waiting to see if she can get him online here.
Okay, Mr. Saldana, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
There we go.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, do you have the PDF up for the update? There we go.
The PowerPoint or the PDF?
Either one's fine.
All right, ready
Great.
when you are.
Okay, great. We can jump to the next slide. Good evening, commissioners. It's great to be here and just give you an update on where we're at. We've just, as I mentioned, this is kind of the process that we're going through, and we're in the economic conditions report phase, and that's what I'm going to report on tonight. The stakeholder engagement is a process that will continue throughout the development of the plan. So we're 30% of the way in of this process so far. So if we can go to the next slide. And this, again, I'm just going to cover these very briefly. The report that we'll be issuing in the next couple of weeks will have a more detailed analysis of each of these areas and a little bit more as well. But we thought we would highlight this. This will actually prepare us for the next meeting where we'll actually have some discussion on some of the opportunities, challenges related to economic development. Next slide. So this is, again, just a summary based off of data that we've gathered through census data, projection data that's available. We've gotten information on residential development and in terms of the residential market that's been fairly current, cost of living and other key trends. And again, the data report that you'll be receiving will have a lot of thorough graphs and information of this, but you'll always see at a glance picture, so that way you can get a snapshot of all the key points. These points are important for us as we navigate through the development of the economic development strategy. Probably some of the more interesting things that we've found has been particularly in the residential market development, seeing some of the activity that has taken place over the last month and over the last 12 months. Certainly different than in other places that we've seen, but it seems like a lot of stuff is holding fairly stable there. We're a few days away from getting the information on commercial and industrial and office types of market trends, and so we'll be adding that along to the information. Next slide. One of the things that we run is what's referred to as a consumer segmentation report, and this really shows sort of how the demographics of the community are divided up in terms of their place in life and their place in income, and likewise where they are financially, meaning what would influence and impact retail and commercial type of development. So you could see that there's a variety of different segments that are representative in College Place, and so these give us a good snapshot of where, as we're doing an analysis of retail opportunity, where that may fall. If we go to the next slide, this one, oops, sorry, yeah, there we go. So this one really gives you the market profile. So the midlife constants as an example, which is 39, almost 40% of the population. You could see the description is based off of general survey data that's done nationally for this segment of the population, and so it may or may not always be accurate in any particular area, but generally speaking, the segmentation reports have been pretty accurate in terms of the types of preferences that folks in these categories have. So you could see that a good portion of your population is in this group, followed by the old and newcomers, and these are folks that are a little bit more established. They do categorize this sector in terms of folks that that are, I guess, preferable to their lifestyle group is more found in metro areas, but they also like the idea of living in rural communities. Then the next group is Set to Impress, which is really your younger generation, if you will. These are folks that are the household type is typically single. They have a lot of different interests and ideas, as you can see here. College towns, that's a natural, given College Place, that you would have this percentage of population within the community. And then the last group is the terminology is called salt of the earth. These are folks that tend to congregate in rural areas. Their average household size is a little bit smaller, but their income levels are probably the highest income levels that you have in the community, and so they have different, obviously different interests and things of the nature. So again, these are just market profiles. We dig in a little bit more detail, but it's always good to start with this sort of big picture look. If we go on to the next slide, please. The other thing that's part of the SEDS is economic resilience, and to determine economic resilience, we need to do basically work with information that's provided by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, in terms of the risk for different factors. And these are actually factors that the FEMA that come from the FEMA National Database. Now they're not, the information is not available for city-specific areas. It's done by region or by county, and so this is for the entire county area. But you can see that in terms of these different categories that are factored in, there's relatively low risk when we're talking about the overall risk index, which is really related to various hazards. Well, that's not to say there isn't hazards that are exposed, but certainly that it's not as high as some other areas. Although it's it's relatively low nationally, but higher than what the rest of the state sort of looks at. The same would go with the expected annual loss from any disasters that take place. The way that's calculated is based off of what the cost of replacement would be for that. And then the social vulnerability is really based off of a combination of the population that is exposed to the potential risks, and it's based off of income factors and other socio-demographics. And so it's not unusual to see social vulnerability when you have a larger percentage of individuals that are on fixed or retirement incomes to have that higher index. It's not, and we'll address this in the report, but it's not it was relatively high in comparison. It's not a significant issue to overcome in terms of economic resilience. And then the overall community resilience, it measures the opportunity that the community has in order to basically sustain recovery over a shorter period of time. And again, these are areas that are reporting out, at least from the FEMA data, to be moderate in level. And again, we go into a lot more detail in the economic resilience section of the report. If we can go to the next slide. So this is an area where the Economic Development Administration has provided analysis for different communities, different regions across the U.S. to basically assess its innovation capacity. And the innovation capacity is basically an index that indicates that if 100 was the average, then anything above is a positive, and anything below would be considered, well, depending on how low, would be considered, sort of on the negative side. I think I'm flipping those around, but if you walk through these, you can see that the Human Capital and Knowledge Creation Index, which is measured by degree completion and college attainment, those rankings are in that 300. This is 316 out of 1,100 or so communities that are ranked overall. Business Dynamic Index is how businesses are established and formulated in the community. And again, this I would say would be in that average standpoint. We wouldn't expect that to be higher in rural areas. We don't see that necessarily being higher in rural areas. If you look at business profile, this is the resources that are available to businesses. And again, this particular measurement doesn't necessarily take into consideration localized programs. So we think, and we'll address this in the analysis, is there are programs that are unaccounted for in terms of the availability of resources for entrepreneurs. There's positive outcomes from existing economic activity, which is addressed in the Employment and Productivity Index. And then economic well-being is an interesting one because it measures two different standards. One is broadband infrastructure and adaptation, and then the changes in annual wage and salary earnings per worker. Now, I will caveat on this this particular information. While we include it in the SEDS because the EDA likes to see this information, we also caveat the information by updating it because the data is about 2 years old, and so it doesn't take necessarily into consideration activity that has taken place. And certainly because this is a strategy, we're going to be looking out to the future as far as what is outcoming. So next slide. So our next steps is we'll be completing the economic conditions analysis over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be getting that out through the city administrator to everyone. We have a SWOT analysis survey that has been distributed. We're already starting to see some return on that. Folks are addressing those questions. And at the January commission meeting, I'll have an update on that, the SWOT analysis, and we'll actually go through a discussion similar to the SWOT analysis, but just to sort of get some sense and feedback from the commission in terms of what we've heard thus far as the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It'll also give you the opportunity to respond to some of the key economic indicators, much more narrowly focused than even what I've covered tonight, that just simply give you a snapshot for where College Place is. And then later on, I believe later on that week after the commission meeting, our team will be in College Place to do a site visit, as well as do some one-on-one interviews with different stakeholders in the community. So that's our update for tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Does anybody have any questions? If nobody has any questions, we look forward to the next commission meeting and the update on that.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
Moving on, we'll go on to the Martin Airfield Area Planning Study by Mr. Ben Hop.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again tonight. One of the few times you've heard from me now, so I'm going to keep this fairly brief and just touch on some of the things that have updated since the group has heard from us. Go ahead and go to the next slide here. So we all know where this project is at by now in the Martin Airfield. It's about 240 acres surrounding Martin Airfield area on the west end of the city there. Next slide. So we've been obviously did the kickoff meeting months ago and kind of been in flux with these next three: economic feasibility, site analysis, and infrastructure analysis, these tasks in our scope. It's kind of the meat of our project, and three things that go in concert. So we have pretty good handle on the economic feasibility study. You heard me give some detail of that last time I spoke on some potential uses for the site. Site analysis is essentially assessment of what you have in infrastructure. You've heard me talk about that too. We have pretty good handle on that. And then the infrastructure analysis is kind of what you need to bring to the site. We're in a little bit of a pause here on some of those details, and I'll get into why in a moment here. And then the final plan documentation. Originally, we had hoped to wrap this up by the end of the year. Again, just based on some of these evaluations that we're doing, want to give ourselves a couple extra months to wrap up that final report and make sure that the city's getting exactly what they want. Next slide, please. So again, on the site analysis, just a kind of a recap of what you have out there. Not a lot of existing utilities on the water or sewer front. We envision if there's an internal roadway network, you're going to have for the most part, water and sewer following that roadway network to serve any sites that would be accessed directly off of it. Don't have a lot right now, but there's main lines nearby that could provide you utility access in the future. Next slide. This is one I do want to spend some time on, and so this colorful slide here kind of breaks down the site into some of the uses and constraints that you have. So, like I said, this is overall the area. I guess just north of that green area is Whitman Drive, and then the white area in between those colors is the airstrip itself. And so this 240 acre area, we're really looking at what's truly developable from an industrial standpoint. And within that 240 acres, start kind of biting off pieces of the pie, so to speak, that you see on the right there. That yellow area is about 79 acres that is currently zoned for residential. Those two red strips you see, one of them is a Doan Creek, and the other is a steep slope that we consider to be undevelopable. That takes up about 17 acres. The two blue sections are kind of reserved for airport expansion that we envision to be hangars, some of which was identified in the previous airport layout plan for Martin Airfield. And then two colors that aren't shown, I guess, is the dark blue color in the pie chart, but that's essentially the airport facilities itself, the runway, the taxiway, taxi lanes, and connecting infrastructure. And then there's a lot of which is kind of shown in orange on that pie chart that's not shown. Those trapezoids at the end of the runway are runway protection zones. There's these imaginary surfaces and object-free areas that surround the runway that kind of give you some restrictions. And that's why all that whited out area is land that we're considering undevelopable. So you take all those pieces out of the pie here, and of that 240 some acres that you started with, those kind of three green areas encompass 44 total acres of potential industrial development is what we're looking at. So the northernmost, that strip along Whitman Drive, we envision to have direct access, maybe some shared accesses off of Whitman Drive. And then that triangle on the south of the western runway there, at 26 or so acres, might only be able to get access from the west there. And those are some of the conversations we're going to be having going forward. So we wanted to paint a little bit of a picture of the constraints and potential uses of the site. That's the purpose of this here. Going to be having some more discussions with the city staff about potential uses and how that might look in the future. And so that's why we want to hold off a little bit. At this point, we would normally be getting into a site layout plan, chunking together different sites of varying acreage, depending on the uses we see best fitting in this area. But again, with some of the unknowns here, we want to kind of hit the brakes on that and see where the roads and infrastructure might go after that conversation. Next slide, please. So this is just an updated schedule. Like I said, we kind of stretched out that infrastructure analysis and project coordination. We want to give ourselves, probably into February and March to finalize a plan. Our next steps are to sit down with city staff and go over, how we envision maybe some of these constraints either getting resolved or what they mean for the analysis of the industrial site. So that's where we're at. We're hoping to have that conversation the next few weeks with city staff and then have another update thereafter. Next slide, I think, is my last one. And that's a pretty quick rundown, but I'm happy to, you've heard from me a few times. I'm happy to answer any questions that the group may have.
Thank you, Ben. Is there any questions? I'm sure there will be as you continue to update us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As we're moving on, it doesn't look like we have any action items tonight. So we'll move on to staff reports. Ms. Garcia, Downtown Association formation update.
The downtown group, in its infancy, had its first meeting, and to my shock, they decided to form the organization infrastructure, including the board and committee chairs, and then, which is technically how it should be done, which was wonderful. And we got enough volunteers to be potential board members. And our next meeting is actually tomorrow, where we will hopefully identify who those board members and committee chairs will be, and hopefully 2 to 3 different projects. And we've talked more and more. Did I talk about that 60-foot tall sunflower statue last time?
No.
Can I talk about it, Mike? Yeah. Okay. So we are looking at branding. The City of College Place, in addition to the healthy stuff, with some sunflowers. And so I have this concept, like a 1-line drawing, you know what I'm talking about, where you take 1 line and you make a picture with it.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see some giant 60-foot tall lit up sculpture, of a sunflower. And maybe it looks like a cross from a certain angle, just as a reference to our place. So that's something that I'm trying to plug the group, but, on top of branding efforts, we're going to work, on event planning for next year as well. And hopefully the goal is by this time next year, they will have their own 501c3 and hopefully their own executive director. And that's it.
That's great, because it's been in the works and off and on for quite a while. So thank you for leading that. And next, the 2025 LTAC funding recommendations. Ms. Garcia.
Yes, the Lodge and Tax Advisory Commission met, and we saw a 300% increase in asks and gave out twice as much money as we've ever given out, which was super exciting this year. The commission opted to fund most of the projects in full. And there's just going to be a lot of really cool stuff coming to the Walla Walla Valley through these projects. Walla Walla Movie Crush is going to be a movie thing. The chamber Walla Walla Chamber is also working on recruiting like film festivals and like car commercials, you know, because we have our winding hills and such. As well as an agritourism element. So I'm really, really excited for some of the things that are going to come from this grant program. And that's it.
All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right, that was quick. And with that, our next meeting is January 6th. Oh, there's one more.
Mike, do you have a December 2024 development update?
I don't think I prepared one. I kind of go over key changes. Jersey Mike's, I'll expect them probably be going sometime in the early new year in January. They're just getting additional kitchen equipment in, things like that. Then the villages of Garrison Creek, the residential donut hole up there. We're getting plat information about that for those homes for first phase. So you're probably gonna start seeing building permits come out of there next year. And then we're also working and well, we're waiting for the documents get dropped off for the Stone Creek development off Majania Road. So a lot of stuff in the new year. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It didn't show up on my agenda over here. So. Yeah. All right. And with that, our next meeting will be January 6th. Is there a motion to conclude the meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Can I have a second?
I'll second it. It's Doug.
All right. And with that, our meeting's concluded at 5:34. Thank you, everybody.